Welcome to the Kindle podcast. This is our very first episode of season 2, and we are super, super excited. We are going to start out this season with a 3-part series where we're going to be actually talking to people who run microschools. These are boots on the ground. They're doing the work of empowering kids in the trenches, and they're applying a lot of the ideas that we talk about here on the Kindle podcast. So it's going to be a really interesting behind the scenes look at what this work looks like. Adrian, you have actually been to the microschool of the guide that we're going to talk to today. So tell us a little bit more.
Yes, it was amazing. Katie and I call whenever we walk into a microschool and you can just feel that they're doing the Prenda model and applying all the things that we talk about on the Kindle podcast, we call it Prenda magic. And as soon as I walked in, I was like, oh, I could just feel the Prenda magic. So I cannot wait for you all to hear about this Prenda magic in Julia's microschool. So let's go talk to Julia.
Hi, and welcome to the Kindled podcast, where we dig into the art and science behind kindling the motivation, curiosity, and mental well-being of the young humans in our lives.
Together, we'll discover practical tools and strategies you can use to help kids unlock their full potential and become the strongest version of their future selves.
So tell us about yourself. Tell us about your background. Why did you start a microschool? Tell us your story.
So I got my degree in education. I wanted to be a teacher forever. And I worked in the public school system up in Phoenix for 6 years. And I got burnt out. I loved being a teacher. I didn't love the career part of it. And when I left, I swore, I was like, I love kids, but I'm never going back. It's awful. And then a very lovely friend got me a job in a cabinetry business, because I was like, I need something so different. And I hated it. I'm so grateful, but it is, like I said, it's really hard to be passionate about cabinets. But it also realized I love teaching. I love being around kids. And my husband had heard about this microschool movement. And I told him, I was like, I want to go back to teaching. He's like, you're not going back to public school. You're not. So he actually found Prenda, and he found one of the little kind of introduction videos, and he texted it to me, and I watched it, and I just started crying. This is it.
This is it. I love that.
I applied, and 4 years later, here we are. And it's been kind of like a dream ever since. I love what I do. So it was scary, but that's how we got here.
Wow, incredible. And how old are your kids?
So I've had some of my kids since they were kinder, but they're going to be, so this year will be 2nd grade through 6th grade.
Okay, you ready for some rapid fire questions? Okay, here we go. Describe your microschool, kind of day in the life, and how it differs from a traditional classroom.
So it's in my house, so that's different. It's
real quick though, Julia, I know this is supposed to be rapid fire. Can you describe what your classroom space looks like? Because it's very different too. It's in your house, but you also have it set up like a classroom, and it's super cool space. I have been there.
Yeah, so I think we're really lucky. It was very serendipitous. We just happened to have this big room in our house. It had used to be a garage, and they changed it up. So it's the size of a garage. But we've got a big table that the kids sit around, and sometimes we split it up into 2 tables depending on what we're doing. There's a big rug that we sit around, and just all the bookshelves, because I just love books. And there's a little bathroom. So it's all just very it happened. And there's we have plants outside that the kids grow in the water, and
it has its own entrance too, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. So it's really nice that it feels like, even though it's in my house, it's their space. It's it's our classroom. It's not, that part's not really my house. It's our class.
Yeah. So how else does your microschool differ from the traditional classroom?
There's only the 9 kids. And then it's the same kids year after year after year. So it's not that new batch of kids every fall. So, especially some of these kids I've had for 4 years, we have really deep relationships, like we go way back. I'm never up in front of the classroom teaching ever. So that's different. And then I was kind of thinking about that too. Like we don't have rules for like, this is exactly how to do this specific procedure. This is not how this is the time it's appropriate to go to the bathroom, and this is how you ask permission. Like those are things that you have to have in traditional school. So we don't do that. We have rules and expectations, but it's very different. Everyone's kind of doing their own thing. So, like Conquer Time, like kind of looks like traditional school in a sense where, the kids they're working on skills, especially schools that have like more of that digital one-to-one situation. But even then, like this kid's working on math and this kid's working on treasure hunt reading. And so it's not even, so that is very different. And, sometimes we do things together, like whole class, but even like collaborate time where it's a lot of times we're collaborating in groups too. So there's always a lot happening. We're very rarely, honestly, all doing the exact same thing at the exact same time.
How has that changed, like your role as a teacher? Like you mentioned, I'm never up in front of the classroom. What other ways has your role changed?
It's like it took me a really long time to let go. Because when you're in traditional classrooms, like you have to be on top of everything all the time. And like, this is exactly how we do each piece. And this is how our classroom works. And now, you kind of let the kids do their thing. I mean, you have to be safe and, responsible and those kinds of things, but I'm not in control really. Like I don't make the shots, I'm just kind of there, like floating around, like bobbing from kid to kid. And it took a long time to get there, because when we first started, I kind of tried to do the Prenda model as a teacher. and it was a struggle because it doesn't work.
These things do not match.
Yeah, it was really hard to let go. And I think I felt pressure too from the parents, because a lot of those kids had come from traditional school and the kids came from traditional school. So we were all kind of trying to learn how to like shift this, like actually the kids are in charge. And it took a while. So, besides saying like, okay, it's time to clean up, it is pretty much driven by the kids. And we're always asking like, how do you feel about this? Or like, what do we need more time? Are you ready to move on? And so it is very different.
I love it. So what strategies do you use to create a positive and supportive atmosphere?
So I think we do morning meetings, which came from the responsive classroom. And I did that in public school, but we've kind of taken that base and made it our own. But I think that time, which is, it's the connect part of the Prenda model. Every day we have 20, 30, sometimes 45 minutes of time where they get, like, every kid is truly seen and heard, and they giggle. And I think, a lot of kids say that's my favorite part of the day, is like we just come together like as a little family. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And then even like our camp time, like those components we talk about, one component each day, having those like little micro doses sort of constant, like we talk about community every single Monday. And I think that's so important to just bring it up week after week after week, and having, having this growth mindset and all these things, like it builds the kids up, and it brings us closer together too.
Just for context for listeners, Julia's talking about Prenda Camp program. CAMP stands for Community, Autonomy, Mindset, and Purpose. And the kids rotate through those topics once a week. So just some context.
Yes. And I have to say too, since when I visited you, you had the cutest little sign and it's so cute. It has an arrow where to go. So I'm like walking on the side of our house and I can smell, was it essential oils? I could just already smell the positivity as I was walking in. And it just was so amazing because I also noticed what you do is a lot of rituals. So it's, and I'm guessing you didn't just do that morning when I came. It seemed like it was something that you guys do every morning, where they knew like little chants and little things that really bring you together as a community, which I see as an environment that you've really fostered and cultivated to be positive and supportive.
Yeah, they love things like pick little cards, like the kids pick like, oh, this is what we're gonna do tomorrow. And actually when you were coming though, they wanted to make sure they picked like these are the ones we love the best or that like so they get really excited about it.
How do you balance structure and flexibility in your microschool? You were talking a little bit about how in the traditional classroom was like very structured. Like there is some about in a microschool, but then it sounds like you're experiencing a lot more flexibility for the kids and for you as a guide instead of a teacher. Can you talk a bit about that balance?
Well, I'm still working on it. So I think we've as a community we figured out like our routine. So like we know this is what works well for us, like the pacing of the day. But then within those structures, they have choice. So like we talked about conquer time, like we do 30 minutes of like conquer time. That's kind of what we figure is like that's like our sweet spot is like we do 30 minutes, but then you pick what tool, where you're gonna sit. And then we do a brain break and then we do 30 more minutes. And so so there's that structure of like, we know exactly what's going to come. We know how long it's going to like be for. So we have that structure, but then even within that, you always have some choice. And then same thing for like our create and our collaborate time. Like we know that this is when collaborate happens, but we like vote on what we're going to like, this is what we want to learn about in collaborate this week. And then this is and when it's create mode, sometimes it's like a free for all, like everyone just picks something from the library, so there's like 9 different projects happening, all the materials are out and it's crazy, but we know like this is the time, and we set a timer so that we know like, okay, this is how long I have to work, so that way I know I need, we need 15 minutes to make sure we get everything cleaned up. So we have parameters, but within those we try to build in at least some sort of choice.
So it's so funny to hear you describe that scene as crazy, right? Because it's like, it is like if you're like, hey, I'm going to show you a classroom and you walked in on that, you'd be like, whoa, this is out of control. This is crazy. But really it's like, what do I see? I see 9 kids who are highly engaged, highly focused. They're doing a lot. The cognitive load that those kids are bearing in that moment, instead of passively receiving instruction from you, is way higher. Right. So it's like our traditional framing of what school should look like. If you compare these things, sometimes it can seem like a little noisy or a little rowdy, but like when you actually look at what's going on inside the student, it's like, oh, I wouldn't want school to be any other way. That's what it should look like.
When I walk into a micro school and it's super quiet, I always think, okay, what's going on here? It's like my paradigm is totally shifted from a classroom needing to look all tidy and all the kids sitting with, quietly, to them talking and interacting and engaging and being excited about whatever project or whatever that they're learning. And you talked about routines, and routines really, the findings from research show that routines are really associated with positive developmental outcomes in children, from everything from cognitive to self-regulation, social emotional, academic skills, and mental and physical health. And this comes from Wiley Online Library, but you can find it all over the internet, that routines are really, really important for development in kids. So I love what you mentioned, though, is that there's also choice within those routines. So the kids know what to expect, but then within that, they have autonomy, which I think is really key to an empowering learning environment. So, what are some ways you encourage meaningful interactions between the students? So, not just you and the students, but between each other.
So I think those morning meetings, like we talked about, that's a big one. And then like how you kind of just referenced, like it's never completely silent in our classroom. So they talk all day long. So I think when it's like very low pressure, it just sort of naturally happens that they have interactions with each other, and just like leaning over and be like, can you help me with this? It builds like that trust between each other, and they've all known each other for such a long time. So there's just that piece as well. And then, we do so much together. Like, I'm so lucky because we have amazing parents and we go on field trips all the time. And I think having those experiences together, we can laugh, we can reflect on it, or we can laugh like, oh my gosh, do you remember when that happened? And they talk about it with each other. And so it's kind of like family vacation, right? Like you build those together. And so I just like they have such tight little bonds. And I just think it's because we just do so much together. So you go way back, and a lot of them are siblings, so they have that piece. But I just they're never like silent. So they're talking all, and being able to have because that's not natural. Like we don't go out to a restaurant and just like sit in silence.
Well, some people do when they have this thing in front of their face. No.
I just think it's really funny how we talk about, we're all worried about like, if you do something in the alternative education world, like everyone's worried about the socialization of the kids. And I'm like, I don't think sitting in rows, being quiet all day is socialization. And so what you're describing is like this really beautiful, true form of socialization where kids are really interacting. And it reminds me of two of my favorite quotes. I won't say it's my favorite because I have a billion favorite quotes. Hard to win that competition. But the first one is whoever's doing the talking is doing the thinking. So when you see a classroom where like everyone's quiet, everyone's just listening, like their brains are just passive, not necessarily all the time, but like for a large percentage of that time, like their brains, all they have to do is be still and quiet. They don't have to like do anything. And then my other favorite quote about this is learning is mostly talking, teaching is mostly listening. And I think that you like really demonstrate that as a guide.
And something very practical that someone can do. I can't quite remember, Julia, when I was there and the kids were taking pictures of each other. And every time someone would take a picture, they did something like some kind of celebration. What was that? But I was like, this is amazing. I love this so much.
Oh, my little like cheer ringleader, she goes, can I get a woo woo for so she does it it's amazing. Like, can I get a woo woo for so and so for doing this? And all the kids like woo woo. I don't know where it started or why it started, but now it's like our thing.
Yeah, that's so fun. I know like when we were first starting Prenda, that's something that we really focused on helping the guides learn how to do is like every child should have, this isn't like something that you have to do in a Prenda microschool, obviously, but it's something that happened in lots of early Prenda microschools where every child would have a unique cheer. And so if they did something, if they hit a milestone, they would be like, cheer me, or like I need my cheer. And like everyone would do their cheer for them.
Yes.
It was just like, we need to celebrate kids more. And that would be a nightmare in a classroom of 30 kids. If it's like, I did something, like you would never get anything done right. But with a smaller group and like more, interaction and culture setting, that it's really fun. I love that we can do those things. How do you tailor the learning experience to each student's needs and interests, both academically and like their curiosity?
So the Conquer time, that's pretty straightforward. We find a tool that works for them. We set a goal that's reasonable for them. And then we just sort of like monitor from there, so that way we're making sure that they're at like, we talk about like our learning frontier, right? Our Prenda term. So that one's, once you get it going, it essentially runs itself. So for collaborate, it can be a little bit trickier, especially when you have really diverse interests or like passions, because you can't collaborate by yourself. So we'll vote a lot of times and be like, hey, like we'll look at the library of options, and like, okay, so we have, for these next week or 2 weeks or what we're looking at. So we'll take a vote and we'll look at like, we'll narrow it down. But we'll try to kind of say like, okay, so like 6 kids really want to learn about, do the American history part, but there's 3 of you that really want to do geography, and like one of you really wants to do World War II. So we try to like, be fair. We're going to do these first and then these and then these. So that way everyone feels like, okay, we get to learn about what I want to learn about. It might just not be first. So trying to be diplomatic.
So our tagline for Collaborate is I'm an important part of something bigger than myself. And I think that you're demonstrating that really well. Like, I am an important part. I do have a voice. I'm also part of a community where sometimes other people's needs or interests go before mine, and then mine will come around. But I think that that's a really beautiful way to teach that.
Yeah, and it's tricky, because sometimes, and I guess that's part of life, right? Like, and that's a good. I should bring that quote up more because it's hard when like yours doesn't get picked. Um, So, and then for create, it's kind of a similar thing, right? So we will sometimes do like big projects together. Like say we're all going to do like an art project together because it maybe relates to something like in the calendar, or we went on a field trip, and like this connects to it, so we can all do it together. But a lot of times too, if we are doing something together, it's something that we've decided as a group we're all interested in, or I know that like, hey, I know that this is something we're excited about or we want to learn about. So just trying to like, make sure that they're interested and they're engaged and it's going to feel meaningful to them. So
I hear you talk a lot about choice. I would like to know other ways on how you encourage students to take ownership of their learning.
yeah. So the Mindset Mountain has been amazing for ownership for Conquer Time, because they like it's their job to like, and they want to like get into green or get into blue. So that has been fantastic, because it's super visual, like, right there, like this is what I need to get done. And it's what I need to get done, not what my teacher says I need to get done or what my mom says I need to get done or what my big sister over there says I need to get done. So that's been important. And then so like for writing time this year, we started like, well, we're all just write, they're all kind of choosing, but then we come together, we set a timer for 20 minutes and we all share what we worked on that day out loud to everyone. So there's the accountability piece. So like, well, I can't just say nothing because my classmates will know. But also like, it's so sweet because as they're progressing through their stories, the kids like want to know what's going to happen next in your story, and so like they get super invested in their story and they want their story to continue, or they want like, or they'll have suggestions for each other so they can build it, and it's like, this is my story. And so that's been really fun to see.
Can I pop in there with some learning science here real quick? So what's happening is like we don't use grades at Prenda, like traditional grades. So there's no external judgment like coming from an authority figure in the form of a letter. There's feedback given, right? But when you get rid of that, you create kind of a void around like, why would I do this? And so you're demonstrating here is a really beautiful application of something called authentic audience, where instead of like external judgment and fear, it's like, oh, I'm going to write today because I know my friend wants to know what's going to happen. And it's fun for me to share and to have the spotlight for a second and to have people excited about the real work that I'm doing, instead of just like, oh, I'm going to turn this in and hope I get a good grade. So like beautifully done. Amazing. That's so great. Love to see that when that's working. And it's like, anyways, good job. It's great. I love it. You know that there's that part in Peter Pan where like they're all learning how to fly, and Peter Pan's like running, like flying, and they're like, they've got the pixie dust, and then I think Wendy's like, you're doing it, Peter, like you're like flying. And it's like, okay, we talk about all these ideas and like here it is in the wild and it's happening and kids are living learning and you're not burnt out as a teacher. And I'm like, you're doing it.
You're doing it, Julia. You're doing it.
Woo woo. Yeah, there you go. There's your woo woo. I love it. Okay, so what are some of the challenges you faced in creating this learning environment, and how have you overcome these challenges?
So I start laughing thinking about this. Our very first week of Prenda ever was a really rough week. So the bathroom door, the lock, it would get stuck. But none of the kids would say anything, and they would just like sit in silence.
Oh no.
One young man went in, and he was not shy about the door being locked. And he was like pounding on the door, freaking out, and his sister was on the outside like, Sam, it's okay, keep breathing.
Keep breathing.
And then in the same week, that walkway, like walking into our classroom, it just like drops off into the desert. And students, and it was at dismissal, and he was like hopping around, and he lost his balance, and he went tumbling into the desert. It like landed in
Pure
cactus.
desert, Tucson desert, not like Phoenix where there's grass.
Oh, and one of the moms, like God bless her, she like went down the hill and like rescued him. But the kids made this song. It was set to the 12 days of Christmas, and it was like the first days of Prenda.
I love it.
Yeah. But it's funny now. So like those were not ideal. We fixed them. But that was like, so like, you know, the kids were talking about like, remember? Yeah, I remember that happened. So not ideal learning environment. But more like serious things. Like there's been some struggles, and I think probably our biggest struggle has honestly been like when families or students, it's just, you kind of have to be like all in to the Prenda model to make it work. And if you're not all in, it's not going to work. And so I think, and you know, I fancy myself Wonder Woman. It's like, I can take any kid, I can deal with anything, I can. And I think I had to be really honest and like very humble with myself and be like, it's just me. Like when you're in traditional school, like you have like your door buddy, and you have someone that you can call, like when things really get like over your head, you have kind of an escape route. And I don't have that now. It is just me. And so I think I had to be really honest about like, this is what I can manage. And I had to be really honest with parents, and, you know, not being like, well, you can't come. But I think I've had to be just really upfront and being like, this is the reality of what you're putting your kid into. This is what I can do, and this is what I can't do. Because it is so important. Like every kid, I mean, anyone that's been in a traditional classroom, like when there's 30 kids, one kid can really like stir the pot, right? But when you only have 10 kids, it makes an even bigger difference, you know, it's kind of amplified. And so I just that honesty and having like open conversations like constantly with families, with the kids. And I think that's kind of how we've navigated that, is you have to recognize your limits. And also too, I think I love that there's constantly this continuing education on like our side as well, like constantly things to be reading and thinking about, listening to podcasts. So there's that growth piece too, like looking back now, it's like, oh, if I'd used this, I maybe could have handled it. But like you said, like, you know better, so you do better now. But I think you just got to constantly be honest and be humble, so that you can make that environment, because you can't make everything work all the time, which isn't.
And what I'm hearing is you have a lot of resilience to not just, after that first week, you didn't just go, okay, this isn't working. You persevered, and you're modeling that for the students, which is really powerful. So how would you say that this empowering environment has affected your students' academic performance and their personal growth in comparison to the students? And I know that you were in a different type of school. I mean, it was a public school, but the students were, some of them had a lot of challenges. So, but like, how would you compare what you're seeing with personal growth, academic growth to, where you came from in those first 6 years of teaching?
So it's a very different type of learning. So there's that. It's not like we used to teach, like you're going to see questions about fractions that look like this on the test. And this is how you solve it in this particular way so that you can get this answer, because this is how it will be seen. It's like exact coaching. Like this is the formula of how to play the game. And we would teach every single standard. And when I say teach, like here's the standard for 15 minutes. Hope you remember it in April. So like, so so like when I look at my Prenda kids, like they might not be moving as fast. So, they might not be hitting every single standard in third grade that particular year. Like they're just, and that's been something that's been kind of hard for me. But I know that they're not moving on until they understand. So they might not be moving as quickly, but I know that they are understanding what they're learning. And if there's something that doesn't make sense, or if there's something like, I know this, like they don't have to just sit there in silence and wait for it to be over. Or just if they don't get it, like, well, if I just wait, we're going to move on to the next topic anyways. So it's kind of hard to compare in a sense, like how they're doing, because it's just a different way to look at their learning. And then too, my Prenda kids, we've learned how to like balance a budget because they wanted to learn about how to like manage money. And they wanted, like, we've talked about how to like look at a menu at a restaurant and pick like, well, how could I pick like a healthy, like what would be healthier on this option out of these options? Or, we went to like look at how the power grid works in like the city of Tucson. Like this is how, so they're learning things that no one's with a checklist at like the state level being like, did they learn how to do this? But I think that they want to know how the world they live in works. So they're getting a different, so it's really hard for, I was kind of thinking about this question. I was like, this is a really hard question to answer. It's hard to compare those two types of learning. So, but I think I see them being more prepared for the world, and I think their confidence in their abilities. I had some kids that came to me and they're like, I hate math. I'm bad at math. I don't like math. And then this particular student, she finished 6th grade and she was like halfway through 7th grade math. So like, hate math? Are you bad at math? Like, how can you,
The data shows not. So good job, sweetheart. That's amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. Our last question is just what advice you would give educators or parents looking to create more of an empowering learning environment?
You're going to make mistakes and it's going to be kind of scary, but keep trying because it's worth it.
Beautiful. Setting them up with a growth mindset. It's perfect. Just like we want the kids to have a growth mindset, we need to also lean into that. And something that I heard you mention so many times is the humility that this takes for you to really say like, I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm not in the set. I'm not up in front of the class. I don't have all the right answers. I could have handled that. Like just the way that you're modeling being a lifelong learner to these kids seems so authentic and so powerful. So thank you for coming on with us. And thank you for all the work you're doing with your students in your microschool.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's always a pleasure when we get to chat. That's it for today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the KindlED podcast. If this episode was helpful to you, please like, subscribe, follow us on social at Prenda Learn. If you have a question that you would like for us to answer on the podcast, all you need to do is email us at podcast@prenda.com. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter called The Sunday Spark.
The KindlED podcast is brought to you by Prenda. Prenda makes it easy for you to start and run an amazing microschool based on all of the ideas we talk about here on the KindlED podcast. If you want more information about becoming a Prenda guide, just go to prenda.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep kindling.